that piece. Okay, awesome. So I definitely want to start off by just acknowledging that these 1 hour intro 101 sessions are really just what I would call clearly just the appetizer to like a larger conversation, right? There's no way that everything can be covered in 1 hour. We started last week with phrases in 101. I believe it went exceptional, simply because it was just kind of an introduction. But more with privilege is really about unpacking your identity. So I'm really hoping that you're willing to kind of think about that and be vulnerable. This is not the kind of presentation where I can talk the whole time, because privilege is one of those things that like you want to, in order to really get down into it, you want to think about what your privilege is and how it shows up. And so that's what we're going to do. So let me share my screen, and then we have a few more people that'll be popping in, but for the most part, we should be good. All right, and everyone can see my screen, right? All right, hold on, I'm just gonna fix my thing because I just like to see all of you as well. So I do my best to try to see you as much as I can. Okay, cool beans. So here we are. So I'll just push all of these. So I see privilege as a journey, like any diversity, inclusion, equity topic as a journey, right? It's definitely not a sprint. It's not going to happen fast. It's going to be a marathon, a journey, something that's like ever evolving. Even though this is something that I talk about every single day, I'm still learning. I still hold lots of privilege, even, as I list my identities, and some might assume like, wow, right? And so I can remember coming out to my mom as gay, and she was like, well, you're already Black and you're already a woman. Like, I just don't want you to have 3 strikes against you. And I'm like, Mom, I'm good. I got this, right? And so some days I don't know if I got this, but for the most part, I still hold a tremendous amount of privilege, especially just as an out gay person, as a person married to another woman, and the love and support we receive. So I really think it's 1 about understanding your privilege, right? 2 about acknowledging that you have it. The biggest misconception about privilege is I acknowledge that I have it, but I don't change anything, right? Then that's even worse than acknowledging you have it. So if you acknowledge you have it, my next question is, what actions do you change in your everyday interactions with people, right? And so examining that, so examining how my privilege shows up, being able to name examples of how I experience privilege is super important. And we're going to go through, and I'm going to give you lots of examples, as well as how I push back on it. So I understand it, I acknowledge it, I examine it, and then like, man, I need to know what to do, right? So like Sammy said, I know I have a lot of privilege, but like, what the heck do I do with it? And then like how you move forward beyond this workshop, because what we know is the real work will happen as you continue to learn and then you continue to move beyond our time together here today. If at any time you have a question, I kind of can see all of you, but then I can't, feel free to just unmute yourself and please jump in, but I'll be sure to stop after each slide to do a check-in. All right, so you got 3 questions in advance. Some of you did and some of you didn't, based on when you registered. But nonetheless, the 3 questions are there for you. And I have my other screen up, so I'll make sure I can see them. So let's do the first one, and I'll take 2, maybe 1 or 2 people to answer each one of them. So the first question was, have you ever felt like you were overlooked by others because of your identity? Have you ever felt you were overlooked by others because of your identity? Anyone want to share with us? Some thoughts? Remember, this can only work if I get some folks to share, because it's not just about me. Thoughts?
Hi, my name is Hannah.
Hi, Hannah.
Sometimes I felt like I was overlooked when I was younger because I identify as a woman, and for some reason I couldn't be good at math because of that, but I was always super able to understand everything that was going on, and I honestly excelled in math. And so I think people looked at me and were like, how are you good at math? And so I
Right.
think
They're
that
like,
was just,
mhm. Awesome. Thank you so much. They're right. The thought that only men could be good at math, right? We know that there's a stereotypical notion that Asian folks that are Asian are good at math, right? Is that really true, right? Does it mean that if you're not Asian or a man that you can't do math, right? Awesome. Thank you so much, Hannah, for sharing. Number two, where in your life have you experienced privilege the most? And we know that privilege is context based, right? So the way you experience privilege at work, at home, or at school, maybe three different ideas of this thing, right? And so really think about that within yourself. You know, when I go to work, when I go to school, those two things are different for you. And then where you live at. So where does anyone want to share with us where in their life they feel like they've experienced privilege the most in terms of the context or the location?
I could share something.
Awesome.
I would say probably my experience with school. I've been given the opportunity to attend a major college.
Mhm.
A lot of people don't have that opportunity for several different reasons. So I do have the privilege to get a really good education from Penn State and have the opportunities that come with a college education that not necessarily everybody has access to.
Oh my gosh, that's so great. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think it's one, sorry, I'm going to open up the chat box too. You can totally use the chat. I just have to make it all work on my screen. All right, hold on. I just readjusted so then I can see it all. Great. Thank you, Shannon, for sharing it. I talk about that all of the time. A lot of the work that I used to do or that I do when I travel to schools is usually work with students who possibly are in the LGBTQ community and they feel like they're not privileged at all, right? They feel like they're disadvantaged in some way. But the focusing on like the fact that one, you all have access to education, right? And so it may be a struggle, right? But you're all here and you all are getting education. So that's something to definitely tune into. Elizabeth shared in the chat that she has a home, a roof over her head, food on her table, and the basics, right? Absolutely. If you've ever had to think about where your next meal was going to come from, right? Or where you could call home when the weather is bad, or just in general, right? Those are all things that we think about. Thank you for sharing. And then how about number three? Because this is the biggie, right? So saying I have privilege is one thing, but have any of you thought of some examples of ways in which you experience privilege every single day? Because if you have it, you do, right? But it's one of those things that you don't think about it. Who's kind of thought about this before today's session?
I don't know if this like relates to it or something like that,
Go
but
ahead.
because I'm trying to still understand like what privilege. I'm sorry. What privilege really is, and but I don't know if this like really relates to it. But I was like the only African American girl like on my golf team, so I don't know if that really counts or not. Not
I
really.
would say it could, yes and no, right? So
Mhm.
context is, so how do you feel like you're treated or you're giving that opportunity, right? And so I don't know what it's like there for you being the only African American girl on your golf team, but I'm sure that it shows up in some way, right? Whether you're privileged because you have the opportunity or you're disadvantaged because possibly you're the only person of color, right? And so, yes, it definitely goes both ways, but a good way to think about it. Who
Okay.
else? Has anyone else thought about examples of ways in which they experience privilege?
Guess if I can hop in, I've never like been seen as like suspicious because of the color of my skin, or like I've never had my like competence questioned, or just like negative stereotypes in general. I don't think I have to face because of my skin color.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Those are definitely great examples of when we're talking about white privilege, right? And so the interesting thing about privilege is sometimes, especially in the kind of the where we're at in the world today, we like to focus on white privilege, but I really want this workshop to first focus on privilege as a whole, because there's so many pieces of privilege we don't think about. Yes, white privilege is huge, something we should be talking about, like racism is real, but there's so many other pieces of privilege that I want to make sure that you get that, right? So in the chat, sorry, I missed. So Hannah said having a car to drive, absolutely. So having a car to drive, learning how to drive is a privilege, right? That someone taught you how to drive and then you were able to acquire a license and then have a car. That's a lot. There are some students at Penn State Edmonton that still don't know how to drive, right? Because maybe no one in their immediate family drives and has taught them. And Elizabeth mentioned that golf used to exclude women, which is definitely a really big thing to rest, to kind of like think about not only being a woman, but being, you know, African-American woman. So absolutely. So those are things to think about. Thank you all so much for sharing. So I have a few quotes that I want to make sure that I put in for us to think about and get your thoughts. But I love this one because I feel like it's the simplest thing and it breaks it down. So I'll read it out loud just for our thought process. But privilege is when you think something is not a problem because it's not a problem for you personally, right? Think about that. Let's think about something just random that's not like so deep. What's something random that's like a problem for other people, but not for you, so you don't even think about it? I know for me, going back to the car situation, I really don't even wear big coats anymore, right? Because I'm so used to being like in a car, like I just hop in a car with like a fleece on. But if you had to stand on a corner and wait for a bus, then you would have to like have gloves and a hat and all of those things that you don't think about until you are without your car. And you're like, wow, to stand on a corner and wait for a bus, right? That's something like minute, but that I don't think about, like warm clothes or long johns or things like people who commute have to think about. What else? Someone else give me a quick, like something just fun and fluffy that you basically don't even think about.
And my bills. Oh.
Say it again.
Yeah, this might not be a good one, but I was saying bills.
Like paying bills?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, maybe if you have money and bills aren't a problem when it's time for you to pay them, then you might not think about it. That's true.
But that's not a fun one.
What'd you say, Chris?
So that's not a fun one.
Oh, no, that's a real one. Someone else said food, someone else said education. Exactly, just going to college, right? Some of you might have been raised in houses where going to college, you knew that was going to happen. But there are some people who like barely made it, right, to college. And right, it wasn't the expectation. Really, they were just trying to get out of high school, right? So things you just maybe don't think about. But privilege, you know, as we take it back and we get deeper, it definitely is. And so I think it's also just really important to talk about what privilege is not and what privilege is. Let me just make sure I can see my screen a little bit here. All right, here we go. So every time I have conversations about privilege, people get super tense and it's super like, like, oh my gosh, what are you saying? Like, so privilege is not, I think it's very important to talk about what it's not before we talk about what it is. So I want to bring some of these things into the space to make sure we know, right? So privilege, one, is not about you personally, right? Privilege is an advantage, right? Something that you were born into. It's not something that you chose, right? And it's definitely not saying that you didn't work for what you have. Those are the two common misconceptions about privilege. Just because you have privilege, it doesn't mean that you didn't work to get where you are. It just means you get advantages because of some identity that you have that's a dominant identity, okay? It's not your fault. It's not anything that you've done, thought, or said, right? And so you're like, I have privilege because of this. No, you simply have privilege because you're a part of this identity group, and that's what we're talking about. It's not about taking advantage of or cheating, although we need to make sure we share that privilege could make that easier, right? So I can take advantage of things because I am white or thin or Christian or male, right? So it makes those things easier, but the privileges are not something that you chose. Very important to know that it's not negated. So it can't balance out. So just because you're white and you're a woman, you can be like, wow, but I have white privilege, but I'm disadvantaged as a woman. So like it evens out. Doesn't even out, right? So it's one of those things that you have to look at your privilege in each of your identities and figure out where you stand. And does it make it different? Yeah. So think about, for example, a Black male, right? We know that men have an advantage over women, right? But white folks have an advantage over Black folks. So if I'm a Black male, where do I stand? Right? And so a Black male may have more of an advantage, of course, over a Black female. But thinking about how privilege matches up in terms of me being a man first and then Black. But usually people see skin color or race more. And that's about power. So we'll talk about that. It's something that you can be exempt from. It's not something you can be exempt from because you had a difficult life, right? So I hear folks say all the time, like, yes, I'm white, but I don't experience white privilege because I grew up poor, right? So let's be clear, like, even if you grew up poor, you still experience white privilege in some way. You might not experience class privilege, so the privilege of being rich or wealthy, but at the end of the day, if you walk into a store and I walk into a store, no matter our social class, people still perceive us to be a threat and you not to be a threat. Does that make sense? Give me a little head nod. Yeah, okay, awesome. And then the last one that's super important is it's not inherently bad, right? And so having privilege is not bad. It's having it and not doing anything about it when it shows up in a negative way, right? And that's what we're here to talk about. Does anyone have any questions, comments, or thoughts? Making sense? All right, cool.
I'll
Sure,
share
Chris.
that. I think one of the toughest things about privilege is, when you ask the questions, what do you, for the most part, we have the privilege of not understanding that we have privilege, right? I mean,
Exactly.
as goofy as that sounds, I mean, I don't know if you're going to get to it, but one of the things that you shared with us in the email about the Privilege Project, the YouTube video of stepping forward and stepping back, I had the opportunity to do that on our campus, I don't know, 8-10 years ago. And I got all kind of defensive and even a little mad, about, but, and it's not about me and it's not about the buts. It's a matter of understanding that it exists.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. And then once you understand it exists, you change what you do because of it. And that's what we're going to talk about. So we're going to look at some examples and we're going to talk about what do we do? Because that's always the question I get, Chris, is like, I want to do something about it. I know it exists, but like, what do I do? So let's talk about what privilege is first. Super important. It's something that almost everyone on this call has in some way, shape, or form. Like I said, even me, Black, gay, woman, definitely have privilege, right? In so many different ways. So we all have some form of it, regardless if it's just educational access, which is important. It's about how society accommodates you because of, right? It's just not about you personally, but how society accommodates you and people in your identity group. It's about the advantages that you think are normal, right? So it's normal for people to treat me like this and other people like this, right? And so thinking about that, and then I like this, it's not mine, but I stole it from an article. It's like a big bag of stuff you're forced not to think about, right? So you're carrying around what we call a knapsack, or Peggy McIntosh called a knapsack. And it's full of stuff that you don't even think about. And you don't even realize how heavy it is, right? To the point that you are carrying it. And so really thinking about it. So let's just stop right here on this slide, and then we are going to share these. So we want to clarify, what we want to clarify is the dominant identities in each of these categories, okay? So let's talk about those. So let's start with gender. Kind of talked about it before, but what's the dominant category? So we know the choices for gender are, someone jump right in there.
Female, male, other.
Yep, awesome. If you could just unmute and say it, that would be great. It's really
Oh,
hard
sorry.
for me to see. You were great to see my chat and this at the same time. So yes, for gender, when we're talking about gender, we're talking about being a man or a woman. But for gender, we're also talking about not being a man or a woman, right? Or being what we call transgender, which means that your gender identity doesn't match with your assigned sex at birth. So the words male and female have to do with sex. It has to do with biological in nature. So just want to make sure we're clear when we're talking about gender. We want to talk about men or women. So we can talk about men being dominant as well as cisgender people being dominant. Does anyone know what cisgender means? I'm jumping into another workshop, but it would be so great if someone did. Does anyone know what the word cisgender means?
Okay, I might be wrong, but doesn't it mean like you, or kind of relates to me like you love like everybody or like a specific?
No, this more has to do with your gender though, not any type of orientation. So
Oh,
it's
I'm
about your
sorry.
gender.
Oh,
You're
I'm
okay.
sorry.
You're in the right neighborhood, just on the wrong street.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Anyone else? Anyone else know what cisgender means?
It means that your gender aligns with like the one you were assigned at birth.
Yes, Sammy, amazing. Yes, so being cisgender, that would be me. I'm a woman. I identify as a woman, and I was born female. Whereas trans people may be born male but identify as a woman. So cisgender is what the opposite of transgender. So not making it like being trans is normal. So cisgender is the word that's really important for us to think about in terms of our privilege, because most of us have it. So being a man or being cisgender would be the two privileged identities. How about religion? What's the dominant religion?
Christianity.
Yep, Christianity. Awesome sauce. How about sexual orientation? Come on, y'all. These are easy. Sexual orientation. What's the dominant identity?
Heterosexual.
Thank you. Heterosexual. Race and ethnicity.
Black, white, Hispanic.
Oh no. What's the dominant one?
Oh.
It's just one. Yeah, absolutely. Caucasian or white. And we know social economic class would be upper class or maybe middle class. And age. So is there a dominant age? What age has more privilege? That's a good question, right? What do y'all think?
Can it be like grown-ups?
Huh?
Can it be like grown-ups or no?
Grown-ups. Are college students considered grown-ups?
I meant like
older, right?
Yes, like older. I'm sorry, I should have been more clear.
Like older. No, you're fine. We laugh about age all the time. Yes, Chris said it, middle age. Exactly. You want to be like right in that age because they feel like college students haven't lived enough. They don't know enough. You haven't experienced it. So I don't know if you all get that. People don't take you serious or believe you. So I would say it's about middle age. I guess I might be still in the, I don't know, the identity that's more dominant, but I don't know. I'm guessing your 40s, 50s. I don't know when getting old is too much, Chris. But yes, you're right. I would say like middle age. So all of those are what we call the dominant identities, right? When we look at those. So let me stop sharing my screen really quick. So what we want to look at now is, believe it or not, for all of those, there is a list, right, of privileges. Has anyone seen any one of those lists? Give me a thumbs up. Hit not, yes, no. Awesome, then maybe I'm going to introduce you to something new today. So there's a list for all of those. And so what I want to do is take you to look at that. So let me pull it up and share so you all can see. And I won't be able to see all of you, but you all can see my screen. And so what I love about Arizona State University, which is a really awesome place, I was able to visit there before COVID. I spoke there back in February. But on their website, they have the checklist for everyone. I found this and I was like, this is so great. They're all there. So what they did is kind of compile them. So different writers, authors, contributors make these lists. But it all started in 1988 with Peggy McIntosh, who made the white privilege list, which is examples of how white folks experience privilege, right? And then basically those lists started being recreated for all of the dominant identities. That also includes, everyone can see this list of checklists, right? Y'all can see it? Okay, great. Able-bodied, adult, we talked about Christian, middle, upper class. They even have a pandemic, and I think that probably was just added. Privileges surrounded by, you know, being a part of this pandemic, social class, thin privilege, which is like size privilege, is something that I feel like we don't talk about all the time, but I think it's something that's super important and more folks need to talk about it. All right, so you all, I'm thought are pretty aware of, hold on 1 minute. You're all pretty aware of your identities, right? So really think about that, because in order to do this next activity, you're just gonna have to hone in on your identities. So let's start. I think we should just jump right into race, because why not? So remember I talked about Peggy McIntosh. If you haven't heard about her, please do some research. She was the director at Wesley College Research for Women for a while. But what we're going to do is take a look at each of the lists. And what I want you to do is look at what you can see on your screen. And I like people to read through them. So if you're white, this piece of the activity is for you. If you identify as white, I want you to read through, and I want you to identify maybe the number that you haven't thought about. Like, wow, like 12 really stood out to me because I've never thought about it. But these are examples of ways white folks experience privilege. And some of them may be true for you, and some of them may not be. And we're going to do this for each of the identities quickly, as you all kind of take a look, and then of course I'll share this link with you, and then you can do some further thought-provoking processes after our workshop. All right. Avery, I'm on a call. Hold on 1 minute. I'm sorry, y'all. Did it go away, or can y'all still see it?
Went away.
Can't see it? It went away. Okay, hold on 1 minute. Okay, is it back?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. All right, so you can either use the chat or you can just unmute and just tell me which one kind of stands out for you. I like to hear things that impact you, things maybe you never thought about, but kind of skim this list if you are white and talk to me, because that's what this is about. All right, sorry y'all, I'm so spoiled. I'm used to having 2 screens and I don't today, so I had to find my chat box. I lost it. All right, so we got a number 12, a number 15, and a number 12. So let's read number 12. 2 people said number 12. I can go into a music shop and count on finding my music of my race represented, into a supermarket and find staple foods that fit my cultural traditions, and into a hairdresser shop and find someone who can cut my hair. Absolutely, things you don't think about, right? As well as just, for me, I know it's finding hair products, right? So when you go into most hair stores, now most hair stores do have it, but it's always a special section. I never understood why it had to be a special section. Like, why does it have to be an ethnic hair section or cultural hair products or whatever they name it? But if you ever thought about that, Walgreens, CVS, Rite Aid, they all have it called something different. But my question for all of these folks is like, why can't it just be in with the regular hair products? Like, why does it have to be separate? So those are some of the things to think about. But every time I know I go shopping for hair products, I want to find a store that has my hair products, because I can't guarantee I can walk in any store and find it. And it also matters where you're at, right? So I visit Ocean City, Maryland a lot, and I'm more likely to find like ethnic hair products in Philly than I am to find it like down the shore, if that makes sense, right? And so some things to think about. All right, so let's move on. Let's do Christian next. Give me a thumbs up, or you can use your reaction. How many people identify as Christian? That's me. So I got my thumbs up. Few people. Okay, awesome. Thank you. All right, so let's look at the Christian one. You all can see the list, right? And not the Zoom? Okay, good. I never know what you can see. It's so weird. Okay, awesome. All right, check this list out and let me know what you think. Because we never think about Christian privilege, but we have it. I know I personally have it, and I don't think about it as much as I should. Throw which number stood out to you in the chat box. Five, 12, 10. Things you don't think about, right? The holiday thing is so impactful. I guess like I never really thought about it, but we get off for all of the Christian holidays mainly, right? And so you don't even think about the other holidays. Like in September, there's 2 Jewish holidays that if we don't ask, we don't even know about, right? And so really trying to be inclusive. And I know for me now, I love that I work in overall diversity and not just in one particular like identity. So I ran an LGBT center for so long, but it really allows me to look at religion in a different way. I do have a knowledge of Islam just because I have members of my family that practice Islam, but I still don't know all of the dates, right? I still don't know when it is, and different Jewish holidays and different things like that. And so really kind of thinking about that, thinking about my colleagues who do pray 3 and 4 times a day, and they don't have anywhere on campus to do that privately, except in their office, which is not super private. And so things to think about. Awesome. Thanks for participating. All right, let's pick another one. All right, let's try a heterosexual privilege, which is, of course, always one of my faves, not just because I identify as queer, but just because this is life for me, right? And some of these things that I deal with daily. But if you identify as straight, take a look at this list and let me know what are some that stand out for you that you never even thought about. Yes, Hannah. Number 13 is the one. For me being a mom, I get all of the time that, oh my gosh, like, what is your son going to think? Like, is your son going to be gay now because you're gay? He has 2 moms. So, basically anything that he does that could be on the borderline of gender conforming, people are always worried, like, what will happen to my son? And I tell them that my parents are straight. So, and most of the folks who identify as LGBT, their parents are straight. So it's definitely disheartening when folks kind of question our parenting style because we are. So what are your other thoughts? 15, paid leave from employment when grieving the death of your spouse. Absolutely. I mean, marriage was just legalized, 5 years ago, right? So really thinking about that. And if you weren't legally married, if you would lose your spouse, you couldn't even get paid from work. So really thinking about that. And then somebody said 1 and 16. Yes, immediate access to your loved one in the case of accident. Absolutely, which is why for me, marriage was like essential to be able to have that and not being asked how sex works for you. Yeah, definitely. So number 16 is definitely a big thing. So awesome. So things to think about. So if you are straight and you aren't in the LGBT community, people ask me all the time, but these are things that you're not thinking about that we all deal with like all of the time, every single day. And so the privilege straight folks have is they don't have to worry about it, right? All right, awesome. So let's do 2 more and then we'll go back to the presentation, but this is all here. Ooh, let's do male privilege. Also one of my favorites. So for folks who identify as men, male privilege is real, right? And at the top of all of these, it tells you where the privilege checklist oriented from. So be sure to give those folks the credit. Julie has a list of 100 male privileges, but we'll just look at a few of them. So for my guys on the line, look at numbers 1 through 9 and tell me which one kind of stands out, or maybe one you've never thought of. All right, let's see what y'all saying. I mean, not that I have no privilege, but it's always good to look. And then for my women, identify folks on the line, kind of think about like how this stuff is like every day for you, right? So number 9 says, if I choose not to have children, my masculinity will not be called into question. Absolutely, right? Thinking about that. I get all the time, especially some of my friends who are in their 30s, people are like, well, you're running out of time to have children. And I'm just like, why is that a thing? Like, if people aren't talking about, women aren't talking about children, no one ever like ex men like, oh, you're getting near that age, your biological clock is ticking. Chris, you said number 5, the odds of encountering sexual harassment on the job are low. Absolutely. And so really thinking about, you know, how that shows up or things you don't think about. All right, awesome. And let's just do one more quickly. I said I wanted to bring up this, but I will. Thin privilege, also size privilege is something that we don't think about, but for folks who are thin, it is a privilege, you know, whether it is to you or not, but really thinking about it. So everyone take a look at this. I know I'm considered overweight, you know, for my, I guess, age group, but some of these things like are that I know that I have a privilege of being able to sit in airport seats and roller coaster seats. You know, if you're in a tight restaurant, you can get through. Sometimes the chairs at universities are not made for folks who are larger. I don't know if you've ever tried to sit in an auditorium chair and put the desk up. It could be pretty tight. But take a look at this list. I'm sure many of you have not seen this list. Thoughts? Which numbers kind of stand out to you and you're like, wow? Yeah. Number 5 for me, y'all, it's like I never, you never like thought about how folks who are not normal size pay extra for their clothing and everything that we buy. And so as a person who could be on the cusp and feels more comfortable in like an extra large or a 1X sometimes, depending on what it is, like it's always costs more. And sometimes you can never find like cute or appealing stuff in that size. So just some things to think about. So I'll stop there and I'll make sure I'll share the link with you all in a follow-up email. But what are your thoughts from seeing those lists and kind of really like seeing the examples like right in front of your eyes? What are some thoughts?
I would say there's a lot of things that I didn't think about in like every category that we went over. So now,
right.
I'm like, now what do I do? So
right. Awesome. Yes, exactly. So let me share my screen and I'll finish the presentation. I only have a couple of slides left. It's more so really just conversation. But like Vanita said, like it's just like, okay, now what, right? That's a lot. And so I don't have all of the $1 million answer, but this is what I do have. I think I have these, right? And they're super important because the acknowledging it piece is important, right? But focusing on pushing back. And I know I've said that multiple times. So now we're going to talk about like what that means. And so you have to figure out in the instance where you have privilege and you look at how you experience it, is there a way that you can push back on how you experience it, right? Maybe where you shop at, maybe calling things to people's attention that you wouldn't normally do. Maybe really supporting or uplifting things that you wouldn't. So power, when I say relinquish power, that could be in so many different ways. But it's really thinking about where you hold power at, right? And so you're a part of, Therese, you said, sorry to use you as an example, but you share with us, like you're a part, you know, if you're the only Black person on a team, do you call out or talk to your coach about why there isn't more diversity, how we bring more diversity to the sport, like how we bring more diversity to the team?
Harder because you of course are, did I go on mute? Okay, no, my headphones died. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. I think my AirPods just died. But how you know, pretty much, do you call things out when you see it? That's about relinquishing power. So relinquishing power is about sacrifice. When you give up privilege, it's about what will you sacrifice? And I think that's the hardest thing for folks, because it's like, I have to lose something in order possibly to call someone out on their stuff, right? And so if you're not treating a group equal, or if something is unequal or not equitable and I call it out, that means I'm not going to have access to it now. Does that make sense? If you're in the supervisor position, or if you're at a job possibly where it's not really diverse, and you see that they're hiring another white male, right? You're like, look, we need some diversity here. Like, this is what we need, and you're able to call that out. That's a big part of it. Does that make sense? All right, so let's talk about it. Let's talk about some tangible examples. So think back to the list. We just looked at those lists and like all the different things you all could do. But think about one of the things that came up for you in terms of your privilege, right? What would be an example? So this is how you experience privilege. How could you push back on it? So we can walk you through it too. So someone give us an example of how you personally experience privilege. Let's just do it right now. Anyone? We just looked at tons of examples, y'all. So remember, this is not a bad thing. This is a good thing to like talk about it. Anyone give us an example of how they experience privilege? Hello.
I took that BuzzFeed quiz and I had like a score of 70 out of 100. So I was one of the things I'm looking at says I feel privileged because of the identities I was born with. So I really don't know where to go from there.
Yeah, well, that's a harder one because that's like something you can't control. So think about how you experience the privileges that you can control, right? If that makes sense. Like I don't know all your identities, Vanita, although like we've been rocking for a while, right? But thinking about like maybe someone giving you preference over maybe a darker skinned person, right? And so colorism is real, right? And that someone might think you're white passing, or and give you an opportunity before they give it to someone else. And relinquishing your power is calling it out. Being like, you know what, actually, like their idea was better, and like they actually said it first. I don't know if you've ever been in a meeting or a part of a group where you felt you weren't heard or listened to, but me personally, I feel like people just don't listen. So if you have privilege, your voice holds more power. So Chris, I'll use you for example. Like me and you have been on so many committees and meetings and teams together that at the end of the day, I personally feel like people will just listen to you before they'll listen to me. And that's just the reality, right? It's just the reality that they deem him being white and a man, that what he has to say is more important than what I have to say. And that's real life. Like I've seen it show up, not personally with you, Chris, but like I've seen it showing up in the dynamics of higher education, and is what I work in. And it may show up for you all in group projects. Thinking about, what's that, Shannon, right? Shannon, you talked about recreation centers, right? Recreation centers, like really thinking about like access. What do the pictures on a wall look like? When I walk into a recreation center, am I going to see two moms? Like on a picture that advertises your services or whatever it whatever it has. Elizabeth said being able to shop anywhere and not being followed. Like, absolutely, like really thinking about that. I like, people laugh at me because I don't carry big pocketbooks into stores. I just do a little around the waist pocketbook because I notice when I carry a big bag into stores, people are more likely to follow me. But also just calling out when you see it happening. I don't know if you all got to watch the second YouTube video I sent you. Did anyone watch it? Thumbs up. The lady was talking about what happened at the cash register. Yeah, so that video is literally 9 years old, but it's so real, right? And so me writing a check versus like my white friend writing a check, and then them checking a book for me to see like if I've written a bad check, like that's real life, y'all. Right. And so these are the things like you don't think about, or for example, I watched it happen before, like my card was declined, but a white lady's card was declined too. Right. But the way I was treated when my card came back declined was just like a bank thing, but it was like automatically perceived that I didn't have the money, right? That I should get out of line. And I'm like, no, just give me a second. Let me give you another card. And so those are the ways in which that when you see things, you have to say it, right? Which contradict the third point. So let me jump to the third point. The shut up piece, it seems a little harsh, but it's real. So if you're a person that is male, that is white, that is upper class, that is straight, that is cis, and you take up a lot of space, you talk a lot, then like sometimes it's time for you to be quiet. Not be quiet when you see things happening that are not supposed to be happening, but be quiet when it's time to uplift other voices. Because sometimes people with privilege drown out the voices of people who don't have privilege, right? And so really thinking about like what that looks like. And then the second piece, not going, is a piece that when I talk to people about it all the time, they don't like it, right? Because if you acknowledge something is wrong at somewhere you're going to go to, and you just go just because you like it, it's free, you want to see this person, and you go just because, although you know it's wrong, then you're a part of the problem, right? And so going to possibly a store that doesn't have any access for people who have mobility issues. Have you ever been somewhere and you think like, how would I get up here if I had a wheelchair, how would I get up here? Right? If I couldn't walk. I don't know if you ever thought about that, but if you ever been somewhere and it's not accessible. We were in Buffalo, New York, and we were in like this nice little coffee shop. We thought it was super cute, but the bathroom was in the basement. So my question was, the basement was small stairs, no elevator. My question was, if you were in a wheelchair, like how would you get to the bathroom? And they is no accessibility to the bathroom. So I'm like, y'all are not ADA compliant, but I don't know how y'all still open, right? But those are the things that we don't think about, right? If the elevator is broke and you have to run up 6 flights of stairs, how many people could just do it? I mean, I probably would be out of breath on the second or third floor, but y'all know what I mean. Like you could do it and you wouldn't think twice. So how many things do you do every day that you just don't think twice about, that you do them and you have access to them because of your privilege, right? And so all it is just taking an extra think on things that you wouldn't normally think about, right? And it's really speaking up, because at the end of the day, people with privilege listen to other people that have privilege. And that's really going to be like my last point. I think we're like really thinking about that. Well, it's not really my last point, but y'all know what I mean. We're wrapping up. And so people ask me all the time, like, should I say something? And I'm like, please say something, because people are going to listen to you before they're going to listen to me. All right. So I want to start right there with 5 minutes remaining. Those are my little tips for moving forward. I really love the fourth one, which is using your position to challenge the systems in which you live in. Don't work and live somewhere that's inequitable and you just live with it because you benefit from it, right? So that would be my last point. So hopefully that was helpful. That was a lot. But it's really about really dissecting your own privilege and figuring out what are the small ways every day that I can be like, nah, this is not happening, not on my watch. So let me stop there. I want everyone to take a breath and think about everything that I've talked about, right? and maybe something that impacted you that you didn't think about before this call or a workshop. What is this? A workshop? I don't know. I've been on so many Zoom meetings today. It's a workshop. Awesome. So what is something that you didn't think about before our time together today that maybe is impactful for you? And that's how we'll wrap up. Unless anyone has like a question. I don't know if you got your question answered, but this is the time. Open floor. Anyone?
I would say all the types of privileges that you can have that they didn't think about, like all the categories, being male, female, race, sexual orientation, and I can't remember the other ones, but
Yeah, no, but yeah, so many, right?
yeah.
Like you just don't even think about it at all. So far beyond race that I feel like we do a disadvantage when we only talk about white privilege because it's so much more. Awesome. Thanks, Vanita. Who else?
I'll just go back to that video that I referenced that you shared with all of us. And for any of you who have not seen that, please go see it. And if you've ever had the opportunity to participate in that Privilege Project, is that what it's called, Anissa?
Yeah, so the Privilege Line and Privilege Project, it's been recreated and replicated and all of that good stuff. But yeah.
It's very impactful. And I related so much to the, like in the video they talk about, initially we're kind of talking and joking and having fun, and then the questions start, and all of a sudden the mood completely changes, and I already shared my own mood when I did it, and so that video is just a very nice summary of that. So I would encourage those of you who haven't seen it to do so.
Yes, absolutely. In the chat, thank you. I'm sorry, I gotta remember the chat. Hannah shared that having privilege in a religion that I practice, right? So really not thinking about that. Heather's talking about the appreciation for the meanings of other privileges. This is a lot, y'all. So what I will leave you with is it's whatever little step you can take every day. You will mess up. We all do. I still do. Like planning things on a Jewish holiday that I had, like, I'm not even thinking about, like, is Yom Kippur, Anissa, like, focus. But I'm not thinking about it, right? Because it's not in the front of my mind. And that's really just how privilege shows up, y'all. And so even being like Black and queer and a woman, I have so much privilege myself that I score pretty high on that thing too, Vanita. So really like thinking about it. So even a person like me who is running a diversity department, right, and like speaking to hundreds of people on these topics, it's really just about acknowledging and then making change. Like, what changes am I making? Really thinking about it. I call out stores all the time. I don't know if managers listen, but I write a lot of emails. I write a lot of recommendations, and I talk to a lot of managers about lots of different things, right? Including like space and chairs and what they're selling or not selling and what's accessible and not accessible. It could be overwhelming. So please just take small steps every day to really like push back on the privileges that you have and the power that you hold. And for my students, you will go into a workforce that these things will continue to perpetuate themselves. So continue to push back on it. Bathrooms are a huge thing. Like, is there going to be a bathroom that you can go in and just lock the door? Does it have to say men or women? Right? And how open we are and we think about it. When we talk about family, are we only talking about a man and a woman? For education, I can't forget who was going into education. But woo, you have your hands full, right? Because the concept of family is not a man and a woman. And there are still forms in my son's school that says like mother and father. And I just cringe like every time. Like, we're in 2020, y'all, work with me. There are some kids that are raised by their grandmothers, right? So really kind of like thinking about all of this in whatever bubble you're in. So thank you all so much. I will be following up with an email as well as an assessment and make sure that you get all of the links And we have like lots of good, great other workshops going on this semester. But really this was just a carrot, and now you have to go and get the rest of the meal. So please stay in touch, join our programs, follow us on Instagram, and just let us know how we can help, or if it's a topic that you would like to see covered, we're always here. All right. Thank you all so much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank you.
it's like evening
Thank
now,
you.
y'all, but you know. All right. Bye-bye.